everybody, I'm Amy, this is my wife Maggie, and together we are ThinkerThemer, and today we're excited to be doing a top 10 list because we haven't done one in a long time.
Yes.
And we thought we'd focus in on trick-taking games because we've been playing a lot of them recently. More and more are turning up all the time.
A lot of them in our life of late.
We've been to Japan recently, so we picked up a whole ton of trick-taking games.
Land of trick-taking. It is. They love their trick-taking. Yes.
They do. But before we get into this list, there are just three things we want to say before we start the list. The first thing is that we are going to be focused on modern trick-taking games. So games that have come out more recently, not games that you can play with a regular deck of cards.
Yeah.
In fact, that's how Maggie and I have really gotten into trick-taking, is through modern board gaming. We didn't grow up playing a lot of those older trick-taking games, even though the newer ones take a lot of inspiration from them. You won't find those on our list.
Yeah. So as you said, it's like there are a lot of games that you could say, well, but that's a re-implementation. It's like,
that's coming from Hearts.
That's fair, but we're kind of focusing on, the ones that have been repackaged into, their own sort of standalone thing.
Yes. The second thing is no shedding or climbing games included on this list. So often trick-taking goes hand in hand with card shedding games, the likes of Scout or Teach You. Yeah. Some great games, 535, games that we absolutely adore, but we have kept them off this list.
Not on this list.
So we're a very clean trick-taking list for this one. And the third point is that we tried our very best to make sure there were games on this list that are readily available, but we also have to be honest with our ranking and reviews. And so we're going to feature some of our favorites that might be more difficult to find or impossible to find. And we apologize for that. We've tried to keep it to less than half of our list. But, I'm sure a lot of people end up with some more Grail games on their list.
Yeah, just things to add to the Grail list, and then things to keep an eye out for when you're seeing things pop up secondhand, or who knows, maybe this list might inspire some publishers to buy licenses and re-implement them, and then we have them
which
back
is happening
out
a lot. Happening a lot lately as well. Yeah. Okay, with all of those caveats out of the way, let's get into our top 10 list.
No list would be complete without a couple of sneaky honorable mentions, and so we'll do that.
It's always going to be slightly more than 10, doesn't it?
It's good to sneak a few
cheating
extra
on
ones
the top 10.
in. Yeah, so let's do that. So we have a couple of honorable mentions. The first one is this very cute little game called Dog Tag Trick. So this is a dog show themed trick-taking game where you're going to be playing usually a pair of cards as part of your sort of turn in the trick. And the funny thing about this is the pair of cards is either going to be numbers that add up to multiples of 5, so divisible by 5, so either a 5, 10, 15, or 20, or they're going to be the same, so a pair, and then if it's pairs, it's like the lowest one is going to be stronger, or a mini run, so like a two-digit run, which again, sort of like the lowest one is stronger. But that's not the end of it. If you can't really compete because you don't have, you're not able to follow that suit, the suit being that, the type of play that was set out, then you can just play a single card, which is the equivalent of competing in one of the side dog show events.
I know, thematically you're missing, there's a major event and then there's a minor event. Major event is also always playing 2 cards out of your hand, and then the minor is 1 card. And so in any given round there can be mini competitions going on between different people around the table, which is kind of the interesting twist for this game.
And you're not only getting, this person wins and that's it. It's like you actually get first and second place, and
just so like getting a ribbon.
Yeah, so you're kind of collecting points. And like super cute. The illustrations on the cards are so adorable.
Every card has a different dog breed illustrated on it, and a little bit of information about where that dog breed is from. It is so cute. That in and of itself is a reason to own this game.
Absolutely.
If you're a dog lover,
if you manage to, again, this is probably one of the ones that's going to be tricky to get your hands on, but if you see it in the wild, Dog Tag Trick is the first honorable mention.
The next honorable mention is a game that came out really recently. We picked this up at Tokyo Game Market. It is a game, though, that just delivered from their Kickstarter campaign, and it's called King's Trick Takers. Now, there was a game prior to this called Trick Takers, which we haven't played. This is the new and improved, very deluxe edition. We actually have the super, super deluxe with a lot of like embossed cards, and the
wooden
card is
components,
so
like
thick.
Wooden wooden tokens.
Wooden tokens. So this is a super deluxe edition that is really lovely to play with. But the game itself is super intriguing. People call it trick-taking meets root, in that what they're trying to say with that is there are asymmetric powers in this game. And at first we were incredibly intimidated by that because we don't play a ton of asymmetric games. A bit worried that it was going to be too complex for us. But actually, it's not that complex. There are not too many different powers. But the thing that makes this game really interesting is that in front of you, you're going to have a jack, queen, and king, and they all have different abilities, whether that's for scoring or something disruptive that you can do to win a trick or lose a trick. And then above them, you have 3 characters that you have drafted. And that's really interesting because at the start of every round, you are going to be drafting new characters that, again, give you these game-breaking abilities, but also when they're flipped over onto their other side, they are the possible bets that you can make for the number of tricks that you're going to win. And so you're trying to get the right combo of characters and bids that you can make based on the hands that you have. Really, really intriguing. I think that it didn't make our top 10 because, well, I feel like I probably enjoyed it a little bit more than Maggie.
Yes.
Especially in the character drafting. But actually, that's not really either of our things. So, like, a lot of card reading and like, oh, you've got that ability and I've got this ability. That's not really the typical way that we play, where we like a very symmetric game. So for that reason, it didn't make it to the top 10. But I'm super intrigued by this, and I think it is one of the most inventive trick takers that I have played. It's just super different, and that drafting different characters and the way that plays out, and then the king, queen, and jack, all of it.
All the
super
combinations. There's so much game in this. And then there's also a lot of different modes of how you could play. So it's like you could play this mode if you're playing 3 players, or, you know, a 2 versus 3 game, and it kind of plays out. So this, it just feels like such a much bigger game made into this, using this trick-taking vehicle as its main thing.
Yeah, so I'm interested to explore that more. But that is King's Trick Takers.
And the final honorable mention is this very cute, very, very difficult, impossible to find game. Apologies in advance. Called Peter's Two Sheepdogs. I think I've got it upside. Yeah, no, I've got it the right side up. It is so adorable. And this is probably one of the most thematic trick-taking games I've ever experienced. Because in this game, you don't actually have cards. So it's a 2-player only game. So you're playing as the 2 sheepdogs, and you've got animals behind hidden behind a screen. And so you're going to, instead of cards, you're going to be playing animals that have numbers on them, so a value on them. So for example, if, you know, I play a pig 3, then Amy has to follow suit by playing another pig if she has a pig, and then that number can be higher or lower. And obviously the highest number will win that trick. But then where it gets really interesting is if you win the trick, then you just kind of put it into your little, you have grassland areas, and then you have a little fence. And then if you lose the trick, then this is where you're the dog chasing the animals around kind of comes in. You have to pick up all the animals in one of your grasslands, and Mancala style, drop one along each one of the spots. You're kind of creating this sort of circle where then it's now redistributing all of those. And so it plays in kind of 2 rounds, so it's sort of spring and summer. And there's just, at the end of the round, you're kind of tallying up based on wherever you ended up having animals. If they're in your fence, you can manage to take them out into your barn.
When you're redistributing, what you're trying to do is a couple of things. You're trying to get animals for you into your pen, because then you're going to be able to hopefully score them. You're also trying to empty out the fields in front of you, which are going to allow you to try and score those animals that are in the pen. And then there's these wolves, which you don't want. And so you're trying to move those over to the other player's field, because they're worth negative points. So there's a lot going on in trying to...
And in their pen, then they actually steal or eat one of the animals. Like all this sort of stuff. And then on top of that, there's this thing of, you know, you're trying to also get more points in summer than you did in spring. So over those 2 rounds. So it's just...
Quite a bit of complexity.
Yeah, it's a fair bit of complexity, but it's so cute. Like, it's just such a great table presence.
And so physical, which you don't usually get with, like, trick-taking games.
Yeah, so it's not really cards, it's actual, like, you know, little 3D animals. So absolutely adorable. That's Peter's Two Sheepdogs.
Okay, and we're going to get into our top 10 list. Now, you will see a lot of repetition between my top 10 and Maggie's top 10, but we could not agree on an order. And so rather than give you one order, we'll just skip over when the other person has it higher on their list. So let's get into that now. So my number 10 does not even feature on Maggie's list, but I imagine it features on a lot of viewers' lists, and that is The Crew. This is the original Crew. Have not played Mission Deep Sea. I know that it's meant to bring in a lot more variability, but I can only speak to The Crew, The Quest for Planet 9. This is the original, and it's going to be the only cooperative game on the list, and it was very innovative in terms of being a cooperative trick-taking game that plays out across 50 different missions. So this game is really great if you want to get the same group of people together and play all the way through in these increasingly difficult games. And so the way that it works is there is limited communication between the players around the table, and each one of you is going to have I forgot what they call it, basically an objective that you're trying to reach with the help of all of the other players around the table. There's going to be one commander who is responsible for taking the first objective, and then the other ones will be distributed. And what you're going to be doing is playing out these rounds and rounds of tricks and having to complete the objectives that are, so that it's complementary for all of the players and what they're trying to achieve, because you need to achieve all of them. Yeah. And so one person might have, they need to have this particular number of card and suit in the first trick that's won. So you don't know what the other players have in their hand. And that's what makes this game so interesting and inspired, because you are having to guess what people have. You're trying not to set up a trick that would make them fail any of the objectives. And that is really challenging. And in the game, they give you the ability to have these communication tokens where you can give a limited amount of information away about your hand, where you can put a card down in view of everybody and place that token either at the top to indicate this is the highest in this suit that I have, or at the bottom to say this is the lowest, or if you put it in the middle, it's this is the only card I have in that suit. And so you've got to be really strategic in each mission about at what point you want to use that communication token to tell everybody one thing about your hand that could be crucial to you achieving the goal. Now, the reason why this is number 10 and not higher is, one, we don't play a lot of cooperative games in this household. We're a very competitive bunch, and our friends are as well. But, and honestly, I have not played the physical version of this very much, but I have enjoyed playing it a lot on BGA, and probably me more than Maggie has played it online. And I really enjoy the progression, so that how it gets more and more difficult, and there's a real sense of achievement with the group. And I love at the end, you spend like the time afterwards discussing how difficult it was and how you almost failed or why you failed, and let's try it again. I really enjoy that, but it's a lot of stress as well.
That's what I don't like as much about it. I find it so stressful. It's like, I love tension in games, but I find with The Crew, the stress, the pressure of being the person that can ruin it for everybody else as well. So it's like, even if it's just like a team, like when you have games where there's just like, you're in a team and another team, it's like, if I mess up, it's like, sorry team. But at least someone else wins. Here, if I mess up, it's like, no, we all lose. And it's like, I just can't
blame you.
Yeah, I can't handle that. And so it just takes it takes some of the enjoyment away from me. But I do enjoy, appreciate how clever it is. And I really appreciate as you say, that escalation of how you almost like start with your little training wheels, and then the mission start getting harder and harder, and you have that collective sort of learning curve that you're going through together.
I just enjoy the mechanics of this so much, and just think it really was innovative in its time. I would love to try Mission Deep Sea, but unfortunately this game just does not get table time in our household. So anyway, that is my number 10, The Crew.
Now, my number 10 is a very light, very much driven by the IP game, and that is ThinkerThemer, the tricky egg card game. So ThinkerThemer is this Sanrio character, one of the newer kind of characters, and I just really love this character. I just love the look of it. I love this it kind of goes by the lazy egg, but really it's more like a motivation. Some people kind of talk about like, it's almost like that like trying to capture like depression or that sort of lack of, and create awareness around that. But just in general, I just love the aesthetic of ThinkerThemer. The game itself is very, very, fairly light in the sense that the way it kind of plays is you're playing a hand. Usually it's like 7. Every round is about 7 tricks, but it doesn't even really matter the tricks that you're winning or losing along the way. All you're really trying to do is set yourself up so that you don't win the final trick of the round. So trick number 7, you want to make sure that you don't win that one. So the whole round is just, that hand management of going, how am I going to try and set myself up so that at the end I can, play and not win that. The tricky thing about this is that when you're playing, it's not really suits. It's just numbers, and there's multiple cards of the same number as well in the deck. So when a trick is led by somebody, you have to the follow is either play the same number or higher, or if you can't do that, you'd have to play the lowest card that you have, which again, it's making you get rid of the really low value cards. That is what you would need to have by the end of the round to be able to kind of make sure that you lose that last trick.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. And so at the end, what would happen is when whoever wins that final round, that card, so say for example, if I won it with a 4, that card is going to now become 4 points, which I don't really want, because at the very end is whoever, as soon as a player reaches 21 points, and this is going to happen obviously over multiple rounds, the game ends, and now whoever has the fewest points is going to be the winner. Okay, so it's the other spin on this is if at the end round anyone plays a 1, so if they manage to hold on to the number 1,
very difficult to do.
Everyone around the table is going to be scoring that card that they played on their last trick. So there's a couple of little things in there that, even though it's a fairly straightforward game,
it's very light, very silly.
But there's enough in there that, it's sort of
very hand dependent for me.
It can be, but I also really love the illustrations. On every single one. So that's ThinkerThemer, and that is my number 10.
Nice. Now, my number 9 is actually much, much higher on Maggie's list, so I'll pass back over to Maggie for her number 9.
Back to me. So my number 9 is a game that I only just recently picked up, and we just sort of started discovering. And this one came from Japan. Again, might be a tricky one to get, but it's called Shock Knights with Poison. Another game that has incredibly cute artwork, but in this one the theme is really quirky. So you're sort of these knights, almost like Clank style, where you're trying to get a lot of gems along the way. So as you're winning tricks, the cards that are as part of that trick have gem icons, and you actually get physical gems that you're winning as part of those tricks. The
production quality is beautiful, and you have a little bag to put them in. Each person, you can hide how many gems you have.
But you don't put them in there yet, so you're kind of collecting gems. But the whole thing about this is that there's poisons or allergies that are going to be happening as part of the game, either because you win them as part of a trick, and the 3 poisons are, I think, spiders, bees, and
jellyfish.
Yeah. So it's fine if you get hit or stung once. If you get the same poison twice, then you're out of the round, which means it becomes a bit of a push your luck game, because you might go, I've got one of everything. If you haven't banked your gems and you get poisoned twice and you're out of the round, then you lose any gems that you had accumulated. So it's that tension of, if I've got a few gems here, maybe it's time for me to leave the round, which the way you do that is you start playing cards face down. But not only that, it's like, well, then as soon as I play my first card face down, I get to pocket all those gems into my little bag and know that I'm sort of safe. But every subsequent kind of trick where you're doing that card that you're playing face down is automatically going to be giving from the supply 2 extra gems to whoever wins that, those tricks. So you're now, even though you're leaving early and
you're contributing to the rest of the play as well.
Exactly.
But the interesting thing about the timing of this game is that there are actually only 1 of each allergen card that are in people's hands, and you can kind of work out, well, if I don't have them, someone might have them around the table. And so Basically, you can force someone to get poisoned by throwing one of those cards into a trick that you know they're going to win, and therefore they've got one of that type of poison. But there's another deck of cards that gets randomly shown and affects all players in every trick. So that is what's going to kind of set the pace of the game and really have that strong push your luck element of like, even if someone doesn't give me an allergen, I might turn one over there and then I'm really at risk.
So it's like there's a deck of cards that are like the gate or the exit. So if you went into the trick, you're potentially at risk of, experiencing whatever happens in that exit. And so that exit might be extra gems, which might be excellent, but that only is for the person who wins the trick. Or it could be a surprise poison that will affect everyone.
Very thematic. And for the first time in my life, I benefited from having lots of allergies because that is the first player condition, the person with the most allergies. So that was useful.
That was very, first time that came in handy. So that is Shock Knight with Poison.
My number 8 is another Japanese trick-taking game called Trick and Trade. And this one combines stock market with trick-taking. And I really like that because I do like Euros that have a good stock trading element. And, everyone's always like, what about Forex? And what about the Trade Cube rail games? And I enjoy those too. We just haven't played a lot of them. But in this game, you are actually trading in cryptocurrencies. So, not that into the cryptocurrency overlay
theme,
but it's very abstract. But what you are basically trying to do is invest in the 4 different suits. And the way this plays out is really interesting because this game is a may follow trick-taking game where you don't have to play the led suit. And what you're doing is the person who wins the trick will take that card that they won with and place it in front of one of the 4 suits that's going to influence its value. But the interesting thing is higher cards like the 10 actually contribute 0 to the value of the suit, whereas lower cards contribute much more. So if you can win with a lower suit card, you're going to be influencing that stock much more. And what's also really interesting is the order and the power of the card that everybody plays, or the value of the card that everybody plays, is going to dictate your ability to draft from these little trade cards, which are essentially the shares that you're purchasing in each of these different 4 suits. And so you want to win tricks in order to go and collect more shares and have more influence over that. And sometimes you just want to shed low value cards of stocks that you don't have, you don't have shares in. You're not invested in those because you don't want those to go up in value. And so it's just a really interesting game. I also really like that if you come first or second and you're selecting from those, drafting those stock little cards, the trade cards, you also have the option of foregoing your ability to choose and taking the lead player. And so the lead player is dictated usually by the person who selects last, unless someone opts out and takes that lead player. And I really like that dynamic as well. And at the end game, it's really fun to see which suit is going to come out as, the most valuable, and then to count up how many shares you have in that. And then you'll get 3 points, 2 points, 1 point, or -1 point for the lowest ranked suit. So
I really enjoy the process with this one. Like when you enjoy it because you as you're kind of going through it, you're like, oh no, I'm getting stuck with this, the dud stock, like the dud currency that now it's like you're trying to find a way of adding value to it, but you can't. And so it's, I enjoy it. I think it's very clever, and it actually doesn't take that long to play. It actually plays fairly quickly.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and the may follow is not something I always like in trick-taking games, so it really works well here because you are trying to think as well about losing tricks. Yeah. So you can flush out the cards of the
really valuable cards for the suits that you're not invested in.
I really love that dynamic. And as you'll see from a lot of my choices on this list, I really love, of course, the interactivity with other players and how you can kind of try and mess up their game a little bit. So that's a common theme on my list. But anyway,
it is. I think so far mine is
yours
is
less
cutesiness.
Yeah.
Like if they're just aesthetically pleasing so far,
but that is my number 8, Trick and Trade.
My number 8 is another very cute game. Oh no, I'm seeing the pattern here. And this one is called Dokito Ice. Aisu, which is ice cream. So this is super cute. Again, like the actual illustrations are really beautiful, but the theme I really enjoy. So you're going to this ice cream parlor and you're trying to, as you're playing the tricks, all the suits are essentially different flavors of ice cream. So whoever wins it's one of those, like, it's must follow. If you win the trick, then you get to have a scoop of ice cream. So you have these little scoops of ice cream and a little basic cone that you start with.
I love that.
It's so cute. Yeah. So you get to have a scoop of ice cream based on the color of the cards that were played in that trick. So, for example, if it was all green matcha, then I get a matcha scoop of ice cream. And so the whole thing is then at the end of the round, you get to multiply the scoops of ice cream that you have for that color times the number of cards of that color that you've accumulated. Okay. There's another little twist. As you're collecting these scoops of ice cream, you have to have a maximum of 3 scoops. If any player gets too greedy and goes to a 4th scoop, that you get kicked out of the ice cream shop.
And
that ice cream's going to fall off. And I found it really amusing that Amy's sister has worked in, which ice cream parlor was it that she worked in? She's like, I used to
Wendy's,
really, like, yeah, it's like, that's true. You can't do 4 scoops. That's just so annoying.
She's like, that is impossible.
So she's like, that's very thematic. It's like, even 3 is going to be tricky. But the other little component that this has is those scoops of ice cream, which is like a little kind of cardboard token. One of them for each one of the flavors has a star, which means that it's going to be worth essentially 2 for the multiplier. And it's so exciting when you have, because they're face down, you don't know which one it is. And when you have like people around the table going, oh, if you have a choice of 2 of them going, am I going to get the one that has the star? You go, no, I don't get that.
Yeah, but if the star's already been taken by somebody else, they've already got the topping, well, then it might actually change what you choose, because you're like, well, that one, there's still a chance I could get a free topping. And the topping is super cute because it's like a little cardboard cutout
that's right.
gets added
the star
to your
is the topping, so you can get a little
cream.
Extra. It is
very cute.
very, very adorable. And then so the whole thing is, obviously, if you get 4 scoops and then you're out of that round, you get 0 points, but then everybody else will do their multiplication, and then it's like a kind of ranking, first, second, third, you get points based on that.
It's also got a lot of funny table banter around, like, don't get greedy, don't get greedy with your 4th scoop.
So adorable, really enjoying it. That's Dokito Ice.
Now, on to my number 7. My number 7 is a little game that actually has no name on the box.
Yeah.
It is called Boast or Nothing. And this game is, I believe, another game out of Japan. But at least I purchased it in Japan.
Yes. But this physical copy is out of Japan. I don't know if the actual game itself.
But this is a really interesting game. First of all, I'm just going to talk about the artwork because it's outrageous.
It's really quirky.
It's really quirky.
Tongue-in-cheek and really,
Yeah, you're like this cloud-like character that is very, I suppose, boastful. I was going to say egocentric, very much boasting about all the things it can do and be and have. And so all of the artwork is really quirky in line with that. It's just got them, eating in an eating competition, like standing up in a boxing ring. It's just like all this really interesting art. But the game itself is actually really good because in this game, depending on your player count, you're going to have to aim for either a set number of tricks, which is usually quite high. So, in a 3-player game, I think it's 3, and in a 4-player game, it's 2, or shoot the moon and get no tricks. And so that's why it's called Boast or Nothing. It's either like you're like looking at your hands. You're looking at your hand going, yeah, I can do this. And so you're boasting by like attempting to go for it, and then, or nothing. And then you are just actively trying to lose tricks. And so what the little twist on this game, so that's one part, is deciding whether you're going to go for it or not. The second part is that there is an ever-evolving giving ranking of the suits, of the 3 suits. And that is indicated by a pile of tokens that is in the middle of the table. And every time the top suit is used to win a trick, which essentially it makes it the strongest, not the trump, but definitely the strongest.
For that, yeah.
Just the strongest ranking suit. If you win using that, then it goes to the bottom and becomes the least powerful suit, and the one that was second is going to now be the strongest. And so that means from card play to card play, from trick to trick, you're looking at your hand and it's constantly in flux. And it also means you can pull off combos. So if you know you want to go for one more trick and then lose the next one, you can play that out, because you can win one and you can look at what's going to be the next powerful or whatever. So I really like it. It surprised me a lot. I had heard it was good and I was like, I'll just pick it up. I'd read somewhere that it was good, but I wasn't expecting much from this little game, but it is really worth seeking out if you can find it. It's definitely more on the chaotic side.
Yeah, fun table experience though. Like as you're kind of going, oh no, I've made a mess, or I didn't realize that I would trigger, that sequence where now every card that I have that I'm going to play is going to be incredibly powerful and I'm going to go over the number of tricks. Yeah.
And the dynamic really changes depending on whether everybody else is going for it as well, or everyone's just trying to lose. So I really enjoy this game. This is my number 7, Boast or Nothing.
Now, my number 7 is actually going to be higher on Amy's list, so we're going to be skipping that and addressing that later. So we're going to go down to our number 6.
And finally, we agree on something. Our number 6, which is Skull King, the party game, trick-taking game.
Yes, it's like party pirate themed game. So the fun thing about Skull King is you're playing 10 rounds, but the game evolves in that each round, the round number becomes how many tricks will be played on that round. And at the start of before you start the round, everyone has to, once they kind of they've assessed their cards, everyone has to decide how many tricks they are going to predict they're going to be winning.
By chanting. Yo ho ho.
And then, usually you show it with your hands, which can get really funny when you start getting into the higher numbers. You're like, how do I do that number again? But so the interesting thing is you don't know, obviously. It's not until everyone reveals at the same time they go, it's round 1, and 5 people say they're going to win a trick, and there's only 1 trick to be played. But then the fun thing about it is as you're going up, obviously round 2, there's going to be 2 tricks. Round 5, 6, and all of a sudden it's like, it starts getting harder and harder to predict. The other thing with that is the only way to score points if you hit exactly your prediction. If you miss your prediction, not only are you not going to get points, you usually are going to get negative points. You're going to get penalized for the tricks that you do win. So it's got a couple of those sort of things going on. Not only that, then there's also a lot of different kind of unique cards. So there's the basic game that is fairly, stock standard, sort of must follow. And then you can have some sort of trump cards.
Like the white flag card as well.
Yeah,
you're just like you can play it any time to lose a trick.
Yeah, it's like you're gonna kind of lose that trick. But then you can also have more advanced cards coming in where there's a hierarchy. And now we haven't actually had the chance to play a lot with those more advanced cards, but even just the base game that we've played, it's a lot of fun. Like, and it's a very lively, it's not going to be a quiet game. So if you're playing in a public space, you're going to be that table, that annoying, loud
But it plays
table.
up to 8. And by all accounts, it gets better and better the more players you have.
Yes.
And so I agree that I was just immediately enamored by this game. Yeah. I thought, on our first plays with a smaller group of people, there was only 4 of us playing, but it was so much fun that I could see this just... I can understand why people love this game so much. Yeah. And if you had a big group, I think it would be just so... chaotic.
It's not a quick game. Like, it can take a little bit of a while, but it's so energizing. And it just, because it sort of builds and builds and builds.
Yeah, they were having 1 card at the beginning and then having 2 cards, 3 cards, and just like the sense of like control that builds over the course of the game. And also the temptation to shoot the moon as you get more and more cards, because as it goes up with cards, obviously getting 0 tricks becomes worth more and more to you.
It gets multiplied. It's like
by the rounds of the game
times the round number. So you can get
in round 7 or something, you get 70 points, and sometimes you are encouraged to do that because you need to catch up. And so it's really brilliant the way that works. It does take a little bit of admin, so bear that in mind. But there are plenty of apps that we haven't tried, but I was like, I bet someone's made an app for that, and there's several of them to keep track of the score, but otherwise you are writing down the scores every round. So there's a little bit of admin and upkeep there, but yeah, it is really, really fun and engaging. So good for a large group that is Skull King.
And number 6.
Okay, so now going into Maggie's number 7, my number 5, so higher for me. This is a game called Tatsu, and this game came out of nowhere for us. In fact, this is a game that we picked up in Japan, but it's not a Japanese game. It's Japanese themed around the Japanese spirit, but this is a relatively new game. I believe it only came out in 2022, and it is so intriguing. It's so intriguing that it had to make my list because it's a game that I played for the first time and then I kept thinking about it. And actually we played it for the first time with Monique and Naveen from Before You Play. Monique taught us and she had picked up a coffee based on a recommendation, and then I was like,
or a copy?
I said a copy.
I thought you said coffee. I thought a coffee and a copy.
Yeah, I mean, I would take both of those things. A coffee and a game of Tatsu would be great. But I was like, I must pick up a copy of this game. And we've played it a lot since, and it's super intriguing because in this game, ideally you play with 4 players and you play on 2 teams of 2 sitting across from each other. And the weird thing about this game is you can only play cards in your own suit. So one team will be red and the other team will be yellow, and you're only going to be playing cards in front of you that are your suit, but the highest value card will win the trick. But there's more to it, because on the backs of the cards, everybody's going to be holding up their hand of cards, and on the back you can tell what suit people have in their hands. So a mixture of red and yellow. And on your turn, you can either play your own. So if I was playing as yellow, I can play a yellow card from my hand, or I can ask my team member to play a card for me of yellow, or I can ask my opponents to play a card for me. So I can see maybe that, well, sorry, I'll look at you, but I'm playing as yellow, but I can see Maggie has 1 yellow card in her hand, and she might just be holding the highest value yellow card. So that Maggie, you play on behalf of me, and Maggie's like, I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that because I do have that 1 high value card, and she plays on my behalf. And that is just, it creates this really interesting dynamic. And because there's no communication with your partner, you're also trying to work out whether you're going to be able to win the trick or not. Now, the scoring is also really interesting because in this game, you're only going to be scoring the cards that you win in tricks if you also pick up your own multipliers. So every team will have a ×1, ×2, and a ×3 multiplier card, and your objective is simple. Do not let your opponents get their multiplier cards, because they're going to multiply out the number of points that they've won in their tricks. And so that is a really interesting dynamic where, someone plays a multiplier and everyone's just like, what do we do to stop them from winning this? Or how do we win this?
But also the tricky thing is the multipliers are also a 0. So it's very, very difficult, if not impossible usually, to win if you're playing that multiplier.
So you're relying on your partner to make a really good call on whether, if they don't have the card to win it in their hand, maybe you're sitting there looking like, ask me to play for you, ask me to play for you. And that's what I think that's why I can't stop thinking about this game, is like, I don't know if I've nailed the strategy of this game. I don't know if you can. There's definitely a bit of luck in it, but there's certainly a lot of palpable stress, which I enjoy very much in games.
So bringing it back to the crew, because this is sort of like that same thing where you're trying to almost read each other's minds and be like, okay, this is what we need to play, but you're only really doing it with your team member. So I find this, as I said, I find this less stressful. So it's the same tension and stress of like, will it happen? But at the same time, it's like, well, if it doesn't happen, it's not stopping and ruining the whole.
But that added element of pressure that's on you to choose the right card from any one of the hands is I just enjoy that so much.
Yeah.
And you have very few high value cards. And so you are trying to find where those are and not burn them too early because you want to use them for the powerful multipliers. It's just a lot going on with this, even though it's relatively simple. I mean, there's layers to it, but it's not difficult to play, but it's also super satisfying. I remember when I was playing with Naveen and him and I just kept making eye contact, and like when we pulled it off, it was so satisfying.
Yeah.
So I really love that.
There's also even a card that is like a placeholder. So it's like, it means if that card gets played this round, it doesn't matter if the trick is sort of won, it's paused.
Those cards get parked until the next trick, and then the team who wins that trick gets all of the cards. So really fascinating game. I'd encourage you to try it out if you're looking for something that's like really unique and innovative in trick taking. That is Tatsu.
Okay, coming up to my number 5 is also going to be one that's higher on Amy's list, so I'm going to sort of wait until Amy reveals that one.
So my number 4 is a game called Marshmallow Test. This is a game by Reina Knizia, and this game was originally called Voodoo Prince. It's not a direct retheming of that game. It's actually simplifying that game a lot. But this game is my pick for intro-level trick-taking that is just really fun, like really compelling, really fun, great for like a mixed group of players, and really family friendly. So
squishy marshmallows as well.
Not to mention the squishy marshmallows. I was leaving that till last, but that's fine.
Sorry, I would spoil the surprise.
I should lead with the squishy marshmallows. Now, done.
Review
done. In Marshmallow Test, this game is really fun because it's a push your luck trick-taking game as well. So in this game, you don't have to follow suit, but what you're trying to do is work out the best timing to go out. And the way you go out in this game is you win 4 tricks. So as soon as you win 4 tricks, you are out of the round. Everyone else is going to continue playing. And the little twist is that when you go out, you score points for every trick that every opponent has collected. So you need to wait a bit longer and try not to go out until people have started accumulating tricks so that you're going to get more points. However, this needs to be balanced off with the fact that if you're the last person in the round that hasn't gone out, you get 0.
Yeah. You don't want to be the last. Yeah. It's the whole thing of like delayed gratification of, are you going to, just eat these marshmallows now or wait later in the hope that maybe you'll get more marshmallows, but don't wait too long because then everything will be gone and then you'll be left with nothing.
So that is the basic premise of the game. It's really easy and it's super funny because, you're always like laughing at the person who, didn't go out in time, got greedy and waited too long and then got no marshmallows. But the game doesn't end after 1 round. It's played until someone gets to 20 marshmallows. And so it plays across a number of rounds. It's super easy to get into, super easy to explain. And just one that everyone that we've played it with has really loved it, but I personally
really
enjoy it.
I appreciate the crescendo because it always starts out, the first few rounds are very relaxed, and then all of a sudden you start going, well, wait a second, when someone leaves, and then it's like, oh no, am I going to be left out, or how much am I going to push it? So it's a really fun.
And then when you get towards the later end game, you know how many points you need to win the game, and so you're pushing your luck even further. I really enjoy this one. I don't know if it's widely available yet outside of Asia, but it should be becoming more available. I've seen pre-orders for it everywhere, but really beginner trick-taking friendly, but also just a great party style game. That is Marshmallow Test, my number 4.
Now, my number 4 is also higher on Amy's list, so we're going to skip down to our number 3, which is actually a joint
number 3. We can agree on 2 games positions in this list.
And that is the game Yokai Septet. Now, Yokai Septet is a game of kind of like bosses. So like the bosses are the 7, so the number 7 in the suit. You've got of course all the different suits, they all have a different distribution as well. So no, they're not all 1 to 10, or that some of them are actually like lower numbers, some of them are middle or higher numbers. So and each card kind of gives you a little bit of a cheat sheet of that. So the interesting thing with this is, as you're playing the game, the aim of the game, and it depends on the number of players, but usually I feel like this is best for us at 3.
Well, Well, it's only a three or four player game.
Yeah.
4-player game is played in pairs,
Teams,
and we
yeah.
always play this at 3 player.
Yeah.
It is perfect at 3 players.
But the whole thing with this is, it's got the 7 is the theme, the overarching theme of this, where if you manage to get 7 tricks, you will immediately lose the game unless you meet the winning condition, which is winning 3 bosses, which is 3 of the cards that are 7. So winning 3 tricks that have a 7 or ideally multiple 7s in them. Those 7s have points in them. So at the end of the round, if whatever kind of condition has been met and it ends the round, then whoever has those 7s and is sort of like the winner of that round will be able to accumulate those points in the form of tokens. And again, it's one of those, I think it's like first to 7. 7 points. Yeah. It's one of those like that you're kind of accumulating points over kind of subsequent rounds. But it's one of those games that is so it's a very satisfying experience. You can play it on, like we often have played it in restaurants while we're waiting for our meal to arrive. Yeah. And it's just, even with people that haven't really played, trick-taking that much, it's very
easy
quick
to get into, super satisfying. That idea of like trying to flush out the 7s and try to win the tricks when a 7 comes up is really cool. At the beginning of each round, you're going to also be passing some cards around, and that gives you a little bit of control over, maybe you've only got a 7 in a suit in your hand, and do you really want to have that if it means that you're not going to be able to win it?
Yeah.
So you might
if it's not the highest card in that suit, and you go, if this is going to get played when someone else is going to be able to win it, essentially. So maybe I'll give it away if I can, have a higher card so I can win that. Yeah.
Yeah. So working out what you hold on to and what you give away is really interesting. I love that dynamic of if you hit 7 tricks by the time before you get to your goal, then you immediately lose because it puts a lot of pressure on you, and you're like, I've got 5 tricks, I've got 6 tricks, now there's no way I can actually get all the 7s.
Yeah. And then you have that sort of table dynamic of people going, maybe we'll make you win those extra ones. And so that is Yokai Septet.
And now we're into our top 2 trick-taking games, and we both have different top 2s. My number 2 is a game that I'm probably going to pronounce incorrectly. It is Schadenfreude, which is a German term for taking pleasure in someone else's pain.
Yeah, misfortune. I think it is linked to when someone sort of overboast. I think maybe it's like the equivalent of the tall puppy syndrome that we have in Australia, of someone kind of over, boasting of something and then things not quite working out, and you're like, that was so funny.
And that is definitely how this theme plays out in this game, because in this game, you are always wanting to come second. You don't want to be that person, that tall poppy, that person that's sticking out above everybody else, because that person is not going to win. Because in every trick that you're playing, you want to have the second highest card in the lead suit. If you do, then you win that round. But what's really interesting is there's this scoring system. So we're going to be earning points according to the cards that we're collecting. As you collect the cards, you'll be tallying up the points. So if you win the trick, you'll take the cards, add up the points, and you're going to be adding at the end of the round to this point tracker. And this point tracker ends at 40. Now, the game ends when someone goes over 40 points and that person loses.
So your aim is ultimately to reach exactly 40.
Well, as close to 40 as you can get
exactly 40.
Without going over.
If you go over, it's all over.
It's all over.
For you.
Yeah. And so you need to collect enough tricks to keep those points, tallying up so that you're getting closer to 40. But as you approach 40, you do not want to win any more tricks and everybody else is going to be trying to make you go bust over 40 so that they can win the game. So it's a really interesting dynamic. One other little added element that helps with that, kind of people pushing you over your limit, is that when you collect a pair of cards, they cancel each other out. So if I had a 7, I'm like, 7 is going to take me over 40. I'm going to lose the game, but I'm able to win another trick that has a 7 in it. The 2 7s cancel each other out and they don't get added to my score. What's also really cool in this game is there are cards that have negative values. So -1, 2, or 3. And that is going to allow you to bring that score down when you want it to be brought down, but equally sometimes you don't want it to be brought down because you're nowhere near winning, so you're trying to accumulate points, and people know that your score is public information. People know what you're trying to achieve, and so there's just so many table dynamics here of like, you know, and you've got to like that interactivity, and I love that. Especially in my trick-taking games.
Yeah, the other thing with this one is if you win the trick, which is because you came second, not came second, like we had the second highest card, not only you always win the card that you played, but then you also win any other cards that were played off suit. So that's another way in which, like, particularly, you know, towards the end where people are able to kind of, you know, be really, really mean and throw really high numbers that are not going to win the trick. But it's going to add a lot of suit that are going to add a lot to the person.
You're paying so much attention to what people have in front of them, and or sometimes you know that they want to win something, so they get a whole run of pairs and cancel it all out. But maybe that's when you decide to win that trick, so they can't get it. So we've had
hilarious games of this where, you know, we're all sort of, you know, fairly close and someone's far, far behind, and in that final round, everyone who was very close went over, and then the one person that was really far behind was the only one that didn't go over 40. So like, hey, I won. So yeah, it can be kind of chaotic.
So
but very fun.
Yeah, that is my number 2. Again, this is a game that is pretty tricky to find. I have seen it pop up, you know, secondhand quite a bit. So if you are interested, keep your eye out for that. That is Schadenfreude.
Now, for my number 2, that is going to be the wonderful The Fox in the Forest. Now, this is another 2-player only game. There is another version, so this is the competitive version. There is a duet version, which is a cooperative. We don't cooperate. Not a thing for us. The competitive version is where it's at this household. So, in The Fox in the Forest, 2-player trick-taking game where you're not really committing to any number of tricks up front, but there is almost like a sliding scale of, depending on the number of tricks that you win for that round, you're going to get more points or potentially 0 points. So if you win 0 to 3 tricks, then that's where you get kind of like the most points. If you win 10 or more tricks, it's like you got too greedy and now you get 0 points, and then the numbers in between sort of vary. So what I really enjoy about this one is the actual trick every trick that you're playing is fairly straightforward, but then you're also kind of gauging, well, you know, how am I going in terms of how many tricks I'm winning and where am I going to be in that sliding scale, and also how many tricks is my opponent winning and where are they going for? Are they going for no tricks, in which case I want to make sure that I start making them win some tricks and I want to lose some. But then to add to all of this, there's also a few cards that have unique powers. So I think it's maybe 3 of the cards.
Every odd card, I believe.
Yeah, so they have a unique power. So some of them allow you to change what the trump suit, which all of a sudden, you know, could change the state of the game and might mean that now you can win more or lose more. Some of them will allow you to get a fresh card and kind of swap a fresh card from the deck. So, and some of them kind of mean that you always sort of are going to...
I think ones mean that you lead again, or there's some lots of different things.
So it's only a couple of different powers, and they're very consistent throughout the game. It's not like they're constantly sort of changing. So it's pretty easy to kind of learn them, and then once you got them, you go. But it's enough to sort of add that little twist. And then for me, it's all about that almost mind reading of what's the other person going for, or I'm going for this. Are they going to clue into that?
How to force them over those thresholds of points.
Exactly.
Yeah, this scraped my top 10. It would be like 11 or 12. It's probably one of the most played trick-taking games in our household.
Pretty much everywhere.
Because Maggie really likes it. It's an easy one to pack and just throw in your like carry-on luggage and play a game whenever you're like waiting at a gate or something. And I actually took it on a work trip, taught my colleague and played, and realized that it's not just Maggie that beats me all the time at this game. It's anyone. I am terrible at this game. So
hilarious.
Yeah, that's not why it's not in my top 10.
Yeah, it's a personal vendetta she has against the game. It's not the game. So that is my number 2, The Fox in the Forest.
And my number 1, which if you're keeping track of this mess of a list, was Maggie's number 4. So I think actually the fact that it is your number 4 and my number 1 is kind of amazing because this is a game that we were just recently introduced to, and it is Nokosu Daisu. Nokosu Daisu. And this game is really interesting for many reasons. It is a game that is notoriously hard to find. It's on people's lists. I know people kind of homebrew their own version of it while they're like trying to find a copy of it. We were very fortunate to be able to get a copy of it in Japan. Thank you, Naveen, for finding 2 copies when we were both hunting for it. But anyway, this game is super interesting because you have a hand of cards that is just like regular trick taking, but then you also have a hand of dice that sit out in front of you that are the same colored suits and of course of different values depending on what you've randomly pulled from a bag in some cases with the dice, and some that you've drafted based on your full knowledge of your hand of cards. But what's interesting about the dice in front of you is they do act like a second hand, but this hand of course is public knowledge to everybody around the table. So I can see that Maggie has a green 6 sitting in front of her and a yellow 2, and it acts in the same way as cards. So it is must follow. So if I don't have a yellow card in my hand, but I've got a yellow dice, I'm going to have to play that into the center. So every trick, there's going to be a combo of cards and dice. Now, the clever part about this game, and I just love it so much.
It's so good.
Is that if you're playing to win tricks, so i.e. if you're not trying to shoot the moon or get 0 tricks, then it is the die that you are left with at the end of playing out all the other dice that you had in front of you that dictates your win condition. So if there is a dice in front, oh my goodness.
No. I'm surprised they had, well, I guess because
I shouldn't have picked this as number 1 because I always get die and dice confused in my mind. But if the die in front of me that's left over has a 3 on it, then in order to meet my win condition, I have to have won 3 tricks. So the whole time you're playing a hand of cards, you are looking at the dice that are left in front of you and how likely it is that you are going to be able to meet that objective in the number of tricks. But so is everybody else around the table. So the other brilliant thing about this game is the scoring dynamic, because you get more points if you are the only person to meet their objective. If everybody else fails, you're going to get lots of points. If like a couple of people fail and only you and one other person, then you're going to get, a medium level of points. And so it is imperative that you also try and make everybody else lose their own conditions. And that's why I love this game, and that is a very common theme for the games is like that, because it doesn't feel mean. It's strategic, right?
That's interesting because like the reason I really enjoy this game is like I don't have the bandwidth to pay attention to what everyone else is doing. But what I really enjoy about this game is that the whole time I am strategizing and weighing up how am I going to make sure that I end up with the die that will match the number of tricks that I'm going to win. So the whole time I'm actually not at all paying attention to what the other people are doing.
But you should be. This is the thing.
But and I still really enjoy it, and it still works. Like it's not like I've won this, in several occasions. I'm not going to say always, but you don't have to. So
no, you don't have to. But it is a dynamic that is baked into the game, and another dynamic that is just so what makes me just think about this design and go, oh, that's so good, is that the longer you wait to lock in that final die, the more options you have with the number of tricks you've won. But that means you're using the cards in your hand, which are a mystery to your opponents. And so the sooner you narrow in on your bid or the final die, the less information the group has about what's in your hand. So there's this like, do I commit early and therefore you're going to work harder to mess up my objective, or do I hold off, but then now my hand is very open because you can all see the dice on the table. Oh my God, so good.
And there could be the risk that then you end up, if you are kind of going for one of those die and that's the only, and you don't have any cards and that's the only one of that color and there's still multiple die and that color gets played, you must follow suit, so you might lose that die. So yeah, a lot going on, but so good. So good. And nokos, apparently nokos, the word nokosu is leave.
Yeah.
So it's like leave die. So it's like the leftover die. That's what that's meant to mean. There you go.
It's so interesting.
So that's Amy's number one.
Really enjoy this game. If you have this on your Grail list, and a lot of people told us it was on their Grail game list after we picked it up in Japan, I can tell you that it is worth the hunt. So keep it on the list. It's really good, and hopefully we'll be able to bring it to some cons and play it with some people. My number one.
All right, let's go on to my number one. Is a game that is or should be fairly widely available, and that is
My number 9.
Amy's number 9, Cat in the Box. So this is a re-implementation of the game. I don't know if it was changed all that much from the original. We've only played the newer version.
It was deluxeified. That's
Definitely
what it was.
deluxeified.
It is fancy as now.
Love the components now, but Cat in the Box is really the that quantum dilemma of the Cat in the Box of, is it alive or dead, and you don't really know until the box is open, and so it's like it's essentially living in both states until that moment. And the way this plays out here is because the suits are in a state of quantum flux, I believe. I don't know if I've used that term correctly. Not a physicist. So all the cards are actually black, like a black cat. And it's not until the point that you play it that you're then committing to, this is actually going to be a blue 3 or a blue 4. And then there's a central track where you're putting one of your tokens to cover up that now technically, because this has been the blue 3, no one else can play a blue 3. And so you start kind of the suits and the colors start kind of becoming revealed or no longer becoming available, to the point where you could get stuck, where you're not actually able to play. And then you cause, if you're unfortunately the person that does that, you're causing a paradox. And so this whole thing is, you usually will get a point for every trick that you win. If you were the person who caused the paradox, you're now going to be getting -1 point for every trick that you won. Another element to this is, before the round starts, you're actually going to be again guessing how many tricks you think you're predicting you're going to win. If you manage to hit that exactly, that number, then you're also going to get bonus points for all the adjacencies that you manage to get of all your tokens on that central table. So it's a lot. And then you also have like the red track, or the red suit is kind of like the Trump suit. So it's like the eternal Trump suit. So there's a lot in there, but I just really enjoy this game. One, it's all the components, and it's sort of really kind of quirky, but I just love that puzzle of kind of looking at the cards in my hand and going, ooh, am I giving myself enough wiggle room to make sure that I'm not going to cause a paradox, and what's the possibilities of winning here? I just really enjoy that. Yeah.
I enjoy it too. I like it. I find it really easy to teach. I find the components are beautiful. It's really interesting, and it's usually so different to what people have experienced in trick taking. So I really like the novelty of it. I feel like I don't have as much fun playing, which is why it's lower down in my list, just because it has a lower level of interactivity. There's definitely the interactivity of like trying to stop people from getting too many adjacencies, or sometimes fighting over like the spaces. And of course you don't want to cause a paradox, but that's the main inward facing stress that I feel, is just more about like, how do I not cause a paradox, and how do I get the number of tricks that I've predicted. So I really, really like it as well. It's a great game, very worthy of your number 1.
Yeah, there you go. And that's our list.
That's our list. So that are today our top 10 trick-taking games. In this moment, we are still open to playing more of them. So please let us know in the comments, what is your favorite trick-taking game? We'd love to get some more advice of other games that we should try to find and to play, and backfill our knowledge with all of the classics as well. Yeah. Thank you so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit like, but also please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we'll be back with more board game content soon. But otherwise, bye for now.
Bye.